What if I told you that some mysteries remain unsolved not because there are no clues, but because the clues make no sense at all? Every year, thousands of cases are closed, but a small number never are, not for lack of effort, not for lack of evidence, but because every answer creates a bigger question. Before we go any further, my G, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. Now listen carefully. These are not loud cases. They don't scream for attention. They whisper, and that whisper is exactly what makes them terrifying. Investigators still discuss them in quiet rooms. Families still wait for answers that never come. And somewhere between fact and mystery, the truth remains unfinished. So here's the question that should keep you watching until the very end. How can someone disappear or something happen when every rule of logic says it shouldn't be possible? This story begins with a case so confusing that even seasoned detectives admitted they didn't know where to start. A person left their home on an ordinary day, no goodbye message, no strange behavior, no warning signs. They were seen on camera. Their routine was documented. Everything about that day looked normal, until suddenly it wasn't. Because after that moment, the trail didn't go cold. It vanished. No clear timeline. No confirmed direction. No explanation that fit all the facts at once. And this is where the problem begins. Unsolved mysteries don't hurt because of what we know, they hurt because of what we can't explain. In this case, investigators had witnesses, but their stories conflicted. They had records, but the times didn't align. They had evidence, but it pointed in opposite directions. One officer later described it this way: it was like the case was actively resisting being solved. Every new lead collapsed under scrutiny. Every theory worked until it didn't. And while detectives chased answers, the people closest to the mystery were left suspended in uncertainty, unable to decide whether to hope, grieve, or wait. That's the cruel power of unresolved cases. They don't end. They linger. As time passed, something even stranger happened. A second case emerged. Different location. Different people. The same pattern. A normal day. A sudden gap. Evidence that refused to behave logically. Coincidence was the explanation everyone clung to until one detail forced investigators to stop pretending these cases were separate. A single connection, small and nearly invisible, surfaced. And once it was noticed, everything changed. Before I reveal that connection, comment below if you believe some mysteries are never meant to be solved. And stay with me because the next part is where this story begins bending in ways no one expected. At first, investigators treated the cases as separate stories, different locations, different people, different timelines. But unsolved mysteries have a way of revealing themselves slowly, not with explosions, but with patterns. The second case involved a young professional who vanished after leaving work late one evening. Cameras caught them exiting the building. Street cameras followed them halfway home. And then nothing, no struggle, no emergency calls, no signs of distress, just a clean break in the timeline. Police assumed the footage had failed. But technicians confirmed that cameras were working perfectly. The person simply stopped appearing. Days later, another case surfaced. This time an older man who never returned from a short walk he took every night. Same route, same time, same routine. Neighbors saw him leave. No one saw him come back, and search teams found no physical evidence to explain where he went. Not even confusion, just absence. And that's when things began to feel uncomfortable. Each case shared the same quiet detail, something so small it was almost overlooked, in every disappearance. The last confirmed moment happened in a familiar place, not an alley, not somewhere dangerous or remote, but somewhere safe and ordinary. A sidewalk, a hallway, a street corner. Places people pass every day without thinking twice. That was when one investigator asked the question no one had considered before. What if the mystery isn't about where they went, but when something went wrong? That question changed everything. When analysts re-examined the timelines, they noticed something strange. The clocks didn't agree, not dramatically, not enough to scream error, but enough to whisper something was off. A security camera ran 2 minutes ahead, a phone record lagged by 1 minute, a transit log didn't match either, the kind of discrepancies usually ignored. Until every case was lined up side by side, and the same time gaps appeared again and again. Small delays, tiny shifts, as if time itself had stumbled for a moment and never corrected itself. Investigators split into two camps, one insisting coincidence, technology errors, human mistakes, the other unable to ignore something else they denoticed. Every disappearance happened during a moment of transition, leaving work, walking home, entering a building, passing from one space into another. Threshold moments suspended between here and there. And that's when a theory surfaced quietly, never official, never public, shared only among those closest to the cases. What if these people didn't vanish from places, but vanished between them? Before going further, my G, if this story is pulling you in, tap the like button and stay with me, because the next reveal is the moment investigators say they wished they had never uncovered. Back to the story. One case file contained a handwritten note from a retired detective, not evidence, not part of the investigation. Just a thought. Every case feels like someone stepped out of sync with the world, and the world kept moving without them. The note was never meant to be read, but once it was found, no one could forget it, because shortly after, something happened that no one could explain away. A missing person's phone, declared inactive for years, briefly connected to a nearby cell tower, no call, no message, just a silent signal. Then it disappeared again. Technicians tried to recreate it and couldn't. The phone should have been dead, destroyed, or nowhere near that location. But for a few seconds, it existed again. That moment became the emotional breaking point of the investigation. Families felt hope and loss all over again. Detectives felt something worse than failure. They felt watched, not by a person, but by the mystery itself. And that's where this part ends, because what came next collapsed everything investigators thought they understood. Until this point, they believed they were chasing missing people, but that belief shattered during a routine audit, not a breakthrough, not a dramatic discovery, just paperwork. A junior analyst was tasked with reviewing old, digitally archived case files, cases no one looked at anymore, considered impossible, and quietly abandoned. And while cross-checking timelines, something unsettling appeared. Several missing individuals were still showing up in systems that should have rejected them, not visibly, not officially, but subtly. A library database that never removed a user transit card that was never deactivated. A medical record that never closed, each system displaying the same impossible status, active pending update. That shouldn't happen. When someone disappears long-term, systems eventually close, finalize, move on, but these didn't, as if the world itself was waiting for something to finish. When investigators compared these anomalies with the exact moments of disappearance, the pattern locked into place. Every case occurred during a transition, entering, exiting, crossing, moving between defined spaces. And then came the theory that changed everything, shared quietly and reluctantly. What if the moment of transition wasn't just physical, but conceptual? A brief moment when identity, location, and time lose agreement. In simple terms, what if these people didn't disappear from places, but slipped through moments so ordinary we never questioned them? Opening a door, stepping off a curb, walking through a lobby, turning a corner, moments assumed safe because they always had been, until they weren't. Before continuing, my G, drop a comment if this twist is hitting you. Tell me whether you think reality is more fragile than we believe, and subscribe now, because what comes next is the part most people never hear. Back to the story. One investigator explained it simply. We weren't looking at disappearances. We were looking at interruptions in routine and records in continuity, which explained the clocks, the gaps, the camera inconsistencies. Nothing was broken, nothing malfunctioned. The systems behaved exactly as they should when something exits without completing the process of leaving. And then came the most unsettling confirmation of all. A missing person's name appeared briefly on a live system, not archived, not historical live. It wasn't a mistake. The name updated for 3 seconds, then vanished again. No location data, no interaction, just presence, as if something tried and failed to re-enter. That moment shattered the investigation, because it meant these cases weren't frozen in the past. They were unfinished, and the power shift came with that realization. The question was no longer where did they go, but what happens if one of them comes back? Because if disappearance wasn't the end, neither was the mystery. And that's where this chapter closes, on the most terrifying possibility of all. Not that people can vanish without explanation, but that the boundary we trust every day is thinner than we ever imagined. After the realization that these cases were unfinished, investigators made a decision they never documented officially. They stopped trying to close the cases and instead began watching for movement, not suspects, not locations, not people, but patterns. They monitored systems that normally meant nothing on their own transit cards access. Logs, archived accounts, old databases that quietly hum in the background of daily life, and that was when something happened that forced everyone to confront the possibility they had been avoiding. A transit card linked to one of the missing individuals registered a partial scan. Not a full entry, not an exit. Just enough activity to show that something tried to pass through and didn't complete the action. Technicians assumed it was a glitch until it happened again, different city, different case, same behavior. A door sensor triggered without opening, a motion detector activated without movement, a camera adjusted focus without anything entering the frame. Small things easy to dismiss, but when investigators placed these moments on a timeline, the alignment was impossible to ignore. They clustered around the same time window: late evening, quiet hours, moments when the world slows down just enough for strange things to surface. And this is when fear quietly entered the investigation, not panic, not hysteria, but fear rooted in uncertainty, because if these cases weren't over, then the mystery wasn't passive, it was active. Before going further, by G, if you're still with me, tap the like button. It tells the algorithm you want more stories like this. And it tells me you're ready for the part that kept investigators awake. Back to the story. 1. Investigator began documenting these anomalies in a private notebook. No theories, no conclusions. Just dates, times, systems affected. And after months of tracking, he wrote a single sentence at the bottom of the page: they appear when no one is looking for them. That sentence changed everything. Because once investigators actively monitored systems during those quiet hours, the anomalies stopped, as if whatever caused them knew it was being watched. So they tried something risky. They stopped observing and waited. Days passed, then weeks, until one night a signal appeared that no one could explain away. A missing person's name surfaced, not briefly this time. It stayed long enough to register, long enough to be logged, get long enough to force a response. And then it moved, not geographically but digitally, from one system to another, as if something was testing the edges, learning, trying to understand how to exist again. Investigators froze. Because this wasn't residual data, this wasn't error, this was behavior. And behavior implies intent. That's when a terrifying question surfaced, one no one wanted to say out loud. What if the disappearances weren't accidents? What if something had learned how to slip people out and was now figuring out how to let something back in? And that's where we stop. Because the final part forces a choice between explanation and acceptance. And neither comes without consequences. By the time investigators realized something was trying to return, the investigation had quietly crossed a line. It was no longer about missing people, no longer about cold cases, but about limits, the limits of systems, the limits of logic, and the limits of what we assume reality will always allow. The team never announced their findings. There were no press conferences, no public warnings. Instead, they did something far stranger. They stopped recording. No more notes, no unofficial logs, no pattern tracking. Because the moment the activity became intentional, the moment it behaved like something learning, they understood something deeply unsettling. Some mysteries don't stay mysteries forever. They wait. One investigator, nearing retirement, gave a final interview years later. He didn't name cases. He didn't give dates. He only said this: we weren't afraid of what disappeared. We were afraid of what might come back. Changed? That single sentence explains why these cases remain unresolved. Because solving them might require opening a door no one knows how to close. Before the investigation went completely silent, one final anomaly appeared. Not dramatic, not loud. A system update request. No name, no location. Just a prompt that read, status, pending re-entry. It was never approved. It was never denied. It simply stayed there waiting. And that's where the trail ends, not with answers, not with closure, but with a question that still hangs in the air. If people can slip out of the world without leaving, what happens if the world isn't ready when something tries to step back in? Before you go, my G, drop a comment and tell me what you think these mysteries really mean, and if this story held you till the end. Subscribe and watch the next video, because some truths don't reveal themselves all at once. They surface slowly, quietly, when no one is looking. And as always, remember this: at True Crime Uncovered, the truth doesn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes it waits right where we step every day.